Well, great to be here at Doctor Day and to talk to healthcare professionals from across the state, to thank them for the good work that they do, not only to keep us well, but in many cases to provide the miracles that save lives all across the state of Wisconsin. As you heard specifically, I was asking for their help as we talk about a portion of our overall ambitious agenda for 2018. A major pillar of that is addressing healthcare, where Washington has failed to act. We need to lead here in the state of Wisconsin, and so a couple key things. Saw a good response from people here as I brought up pre-existing conditions. My hope is that they'll help us encourage the state Senate to move forward in passing legislation that will ensure that no matter what happens in Washington, pre-existing conditions will be covered here in the state of Wisconsin. We're willing to work with the Senate, members of the Assembly, to make sure they get something done by the end of this legislative session. Obviously, that's something that's important for all of us, and I think important for the people that were here today. Secondly, I talked a little bit about our intentions in going forward and seeking a permanent waiver for senior care to make sure that seniors like my parents and others out there have access to a good supplement. People like my parents and others get their health care coverage via Medicare, which is a federal program, but senior care is an important supplement for that. And we maintained that through the last budget. We've asked for the waiver temporarily already, but now we want to make sure going forward we can do that permanently, or at least as long as possible, to provide people peace of mind and further stability, particularly for our seniors. And then the last big push is asking folks here today to help us lobby lawmakers about addressing the premium increases we've seen here and across the nation when it comes to the individual market. Under the so-called Affordable Care Act, Obamacare premiums have jumped up 36% statewide in the individual market. In places like northeastern Wisconsin, they're up, in many cases, well over 100%. And I used an example I gave the other day in the State of the State of someone who saw a nearly $2,000 per month premium increase, and that's just unsustainable and unacceptable. And so our hope is that this is, as I mentioned here, it's kind of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I give you guys a new analogy today. It's not too hot, not too cold, just about right. It doesn't go so far as to take a bunch of taxpayers' money and put people into a situation where there'll be long-term dependency on the government, which is what some have advocated. It also isn't go the other direction, which is some saying we shouldn't do anything. This is a market-driven way to help drive down premiums, particularly for those who have or work for small businesses or maybe on a family farm, making it affordable and accessible without the government dictating the terms of that and without the government saying what they can or can't do. This will open up more free choice in the marketplaces. We believe more plans will come into the market, driving down cost and keeping premiums, our goal going forward, at a level that's very similar to what people can purchase on the group insurance market, which is today, for this year, under 5% premium increases. So with that, I'll take questions on that or anything else.
I'm curious, would you consider doing what Idaho's doing, basically deciding what insurers would have to offer or not offer to keep premiums low?
Well, for us, that's part of it. No matter what plan they get on, we want to make sure pre-existing conditions are covered. For us, the reinsurance is a way that we can drive down premiums and leave the choices ultimately up beyond pre-existing conditions up to the consumer. If they want to buy one plan or another, they can do that in the individual market. We just want to make sure that overall premiums are at a reasonable level.
State of the Union tonight, what are you hoping to hear the President talk about?
Well, we know, one of the things that hasn't got a lot of attention, but is on the tax plan. I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about that and the economy here in the state of Wisconsin. According to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, the typical taxpayer or family where both parents work, 2 kids at home, will see savings under that plan of $2,508. We'll talk a little bit about that. A big reason for that is at the end they double the child tax credit. I'd love to hear that mentioned because I'd love to make that connection here in the state of Wisconsin with us creating a new child tax credit. That's a good way to go. That's a good way to put more money back in the hands of working families. I'd like to hear about some of the other priorities. In the past, we've heard discussions about repealing or replacing Obamacare. I'd love to hear what his plans are for that going forward and how that might benefit the people of Wisconsin. I'd love to hear more about infrastructure and what plans they have there going forward. And we're going to continue to lobby, whether we hear it or not, but we're going to continue to lobby on trade. We think it's critically important, particularly when it comes to our farmers in this state. It's an area where we might have a slightly different view than the administration, but I just think it's critically important, whether it's here in North America or around the world, that our farmers need to have markets, particularly at a time when commodity prices are not nearly as high as we'd like to see here in the state of Wisconsin. I just think it's critically important that we have good trading relationships with partners around the world.
You mentioned your child tax credit that would get paid out probably in August, around the time people are voting in the primary. Democrats are saying, look, this is just a play for people's votes. How do you respond to that?
For us, it ties right into back to school. This was the quickest, easiest way to get money right back in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers. The timing was we couldn't do it. Timing had already passed in terms of doing it on the income taxes. For this year, it will be for subsequent years. But to be able to make it a sales tax rebate, that really had a punch, meaning it had an impact on the economy, not only a benefit to families, $100 per child for everyone living at home under the age of 18, but also we believe that timing it so that families will either get it deposited or get a check right before September 1st, we think puts a huge emphasis on these dollars being spent and I'll be visiting a couple communities later today in Menominee and in Wausau. I'll be visiting more in the future to draw attention to local merchants. Many of the small businesses and other employers in this state, I believe we'll see a huge increase in terms of families coming in and buying not only school supplies, but new shoes and clothing and other things. And I think the long-term benefit to that is that will almost entirely recycle those dollars back into the state's economy, which means going into next year in the new budget, I believe will help us create another bigger than expected surplus, which will then help us fund our priorities like schools and finding ways to continue to lower property and income taxes for everyone.
Governor, at the same time you've been talking about making sure that people on drugs aren't getting welfare checks, making sure people are working before they get welfare benefits. And then on the other hand, you're saying let's just give $100 per child to these families that might be making millions of dollars, or families that might have parents on drugs.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about that contradiction?
Well, the difference is just technically, there's no other way you can do it than a sales tax rebate. And so because it's a sales tax rebate, you have to account for anyone who potentially could have purchased things and paid a sales tax. In the future, going ahead, once we can put on the income tax, it would be tied to taxable liability. So it would address those issues and those concerns.
Well, hold on, it's going to be refundable, though, isn't it? Or?
Well, right, but the idea would be it would be tied in. We're looking at ways of tying it into income taxes in the future. But here, the sales tax rebate has to be wide open. And so we think in terms of the impact on kids, $100 per kid is a significant impact. It's something good for kids across the state. We think for some of the other things you mentioned in terms of public assistance and other things we can do, we can tie that to work. We think that'll help drive the changes that we need to get more people into the workforce, and that those are the best tools to do
You're
it.
saying in the future you would change, because you propose it as refundable?
We did as refundable, but we think of tying it in income taxes, and we'd be even open if the legislature so deemed that to tie it directly into taxable liability. The key right now is getting it into people's hands right away before school starts, so it can have a positive
What
impact.
about drug-related? Drug testing for this kind of a benefit in the future?
I think the key for us is if we're doing it with assistance, public assistance, that's the easiest way, because what we're trying to do with public assistance is move people into the workforce. In the case of this benefit, it's directly to try and help children, and particularly as they get ready for school.
You mentioned the president talking about infrastructure at State of the Union. It's something that you didn't touch on much at State of the State last week, even though it was a hot topic. Why is that?
What the president does?
No, talking about infrastructure, it was a hot topic last year. It wasn't touched on much at State of the State last week.
Well, I touched on it. I said that we put $3 billion more in than Jim Dole did over 8 years. So for anybody who thinks we should put more in, we have. We put $3 billion more in over 8 years than Jim Dole did over 8 years. We put the biggest increase in state aid to local governments to fix roads, to repair bridges, to fill potholes. Local governments got the biggest increase in 20 years going forward. And in fact, I think the biggest thing we're likely to hear from this spring are people complaining about all the barrels, the orange barrels that'll be out in local jurisdictions across the state, because they're going to have this big influx of new dollars out there. We talked about how because of the savings that Dave Ross and his team found, we have over 20 more projects that are going to be moved up from where they were in the state budget process. I think we did talk a lot about infrastructure.
Kevin Nicholson,
last one, please.
Kevin Nicholson, some news today about him doing some paid work for Democrats in 2002. Are you rock solid confident that he's a conservative?
I'll leave that up to the voters. I've not picked someone in that primary. I won't pick anyone in the primary. It'll ultimately be up to the voters.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks guys.